Okay, in my last video, I talked about California possibly seceding from the Union and why I didn't feel that this was likely to happen. The second video is about what happens if it does happen, right? What if they do secede? What will happen to California? What will happen to the U.S.? The first thing that I want to talk about is agriculture. Obviously, agriculture in California is very important to the U.S. We get a lot of our fresh fruits and vegetables, especially during the winter months. They come from California. So, what happens if California secedes? Obviously, the price of those goods will go up for the rest of America. But what happens to California? What happens? I mean, are they able to just keep growing them like they are and now possibly charging tariffs and taxing more based on what their state says, their new country says? Um, I don't think so. I think one of the reasons that their agriculture will honestly begin to fail is that they rely on other states very heavily for their water, especially in the areas that are heavily agricultural. Additionally, it's entirely possible that these areas that are heavily agricultural would not want to stay and continue being part of California if they seceded. The thing is, they could also secede from the state of California, and this has been suggested before. I've actually seen somebody make this suggestion, and obviously it was looked at as ludicrous. And under normal circumstances, it would be very ludicrous for a section of the state to just secede from the rest of the state. But given the option of no longer being in a part of this country, um, or seceding from your state and remaining a part of America, many people would choose to just go ahead and secede and break from the state. And this is essentially what happened in Virginia just prior to the Civil War, where West Virginia broke off from Virginia and they seceded from Virginia. So, with the water issue, though, the thing is that the United States could grow the crops they're growing in California elsewhere. They don't have to grow them there. They're probably easiest to be grown in California. That's the easiest place to grow them. It's the easiest place to send all that irrigation, the easiest place to send all that water, but they don't have to do it there. They could be irrigating in Arizona, in Utah. They could be irrigating in New Mexico. Many of these states, especially New Mexico and Arizona, have very long growing seasons. Um, Agriculture would suffer for the United States regardless, but the United States can't afford to shift its money and focus on those states and leave California to themselves. So, moving on from that issue, I had talked in the earlier video about the economy for California. I do believe that many companies would move away. Um, I believe essentially California's economy would almost collapse if they seceded. And what you would see over time, you know, they could potentially rebuild their economy and rebuild themselves as a nation, but it would take a long time. It's not like they would secede and the next day things would be great for them. I've seen a lot of videos and I've seen a lot of news articles that suggest, oh, California puts out way more money than they get back from the federal government, and that this is one reason that their economy would essentially thrive if they no longer had to pay that money to the federal government. This is really inaccurate at best. The thing is, none of those videos are considering money that doesn't necessarily come back to California, but really is essential to the nation as a whole, which includes California, such as money spent on the military. No, that money doesn't really come back to California, but The military is essential to protecting this nation. So, one of the things that would happen if California seceded is that they would now have to pay for their own military. Now, many Californians would probably tell you, well, we don't really want to have a military. We don't want to have a super strong military, and that's fine. Have fun with that idea, but honestly, to not protect yourself in our world today would be a tragic mistake. Even the countries that are surrounding the United States right now, which is Mexico, California, the threat of them being invaded is very low. However, they still spend pretty well on their military. They don't spend as much as the United States does. That is true. But they spend pretty decent amounts on their military, and I do not think that some of these people that are excited about the prospect of secession are taking that into account. Um, Moving on from that issue, uh, what would the United States really do to California? There are really two possibilities. Either the United States says, go ahead, or the United States would punish California in some form or another. And one particular scenario comes to mind. Before the Civil War, Maryland was going to vote on secession. Odds are they were probably going to secede, and Lincoln arrested their legislatures so they could not vote on secession. It's not an exact parallel for this scenario, especially since it would be a ballot initiative. You can't essentially arrest all of California, but you could put California under martial law. And that could be done using the National Guard there in California. And technically, the National Guard operates at the behest of the governor of every state. So you would have to think that the governor, if the state of California voted for secession, the governor would not order out the National Guard. However, I think you'll find that under such a circumstance, if the president gave the guardsmen a direct order to restore um, restore order and to begin martial law in California, I believe that they would follow it. And regardless of whether or not they like the president, this is not what any of this is about. But they would follow that order because they swore an oath, essentially, that they would follow the direction of the president of the United States, and that they would protect the country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And this would be a domestic enemy. Moving on, the last thing that I wanted to talk about, if if California did secede and the United States just let them go, the Republicans would then pretty much be dominating politics in the United States. And it's very easy to see why. They would lose a significant portion of the population, that's very liberal. The redistribution of electoral votes throughout all the rest of the states, unfortunately, the rest of the country is just not liberal enough to offset the fact that a lot of those votes would go to some very conservative states. It would almost assure Republican victory in presidential elections for the foreseeable future. Now, that's not to say that it would be forever. Politics change over time, places change over time. And you also have to consider that many of these liberals that are in California that may not have wanted to actually secede, they would also probably immigrate, leave, and come elsewhere in America, and they could very easily change the demographics in a particular area, say maybe Arizona or Oregon or something like that, to be even more liberal than it was and have a higher population than it used to have. So again, just like with the last video, respectful comments, nothing racist, nothing hateful, or I will turn off the comments. Let me know what you think.